few months ago, I reviewed Rocketbook's new Panda Planner, and while I really like the organization and detail that it offers, I was surprised that some of the templates called for ink to be left on the pages for more than 30 days, because Rocketbook used to recommend that you erase their notebooks within that time frame to avoid the ink staining the page. This page staining, or ghosting as it's often called in forums, is something I've experienced in the past when I forgot to erase my pages in my original Everlast notebook. But it's also a common issue if you reuse the same section of a page over and over again, even if you erase it regularly. This is particularly pronounced if you use templates that call you to fill in the same section every time. So I wanted to investigate this a little further to see how long I should be leaving the ink on my Rocketbook synthetic pages if I want to reduce the amount of ghosting that I see. To test this, I used some pages of my mini flip notebook that had never been used before, and I wrote out the same test page every Monday morning for 13 weeks, then again on the final day of testing, so that I could compare to the best case scenario where the ink was erased on the same day that it was written. Each test page included the same written sections and shapes, which I replicated in black, blue, and red ink for both 0.7mm and 0.5mm FriXion pen sizes, just in case the color or tip size might make a difference. Then, after 13 weeks, I erased all of the pages, leaving just the title so that I could identify which was which. I also scanned each page using the Rocketbook app before and after erasing and took pictures of all of them. After unbinding each page and doing a side-by-side comparison, I noticed a few things, the first being that time does play a factor. The ghosting of my test templates became more pronounced depending on how long the ink had been left on the page. Not surprising, when I erased the ink from a brand new page on the same day that it was written, there wasn't any noticeable ghosting, just a few faint impressions from where the pen tip pressed into the page. After as little as 1 week, I was able to see some very faint ghosting, and by the 5th week, the shapes that I had drawn as a part of my test template were showing up a little clearer. The same thing happened with the written text after 6 weeks of the ink being left on the page. But after that point, I didn't notice much change in the prominence of the ghosting for the remaining 7 weeks of the test. But I did notice some interesting points relating to the color of pen used and the pooling of ink. In the first few weeks, I was able to notice the ghosting from the red ink to be very slightly more prominent than the blue or black ink, and over time I would say the blue ink was the least visible overall, but if you exceed the 5-week time frame, then it's not going to make a really big difference. A more important factor was how much the ink pooled in one spot. Ghosting was generally more pronounced on the shapes than on the text because the lines were a little thicker. I suspect this is also why the ghosting was less of an issue with the 0.5mm pens compared to the 0.7mm pens. Having said all this, I think it's important to note that even after the ink rested on the page for 13 weeks and the ghosting was visibly apparent, it had no impact on any of the scans that I made with the Rocketbook app. So if your primary concern is whether or not your digital notes will be impacted, you should be okay. It's only the physical notebook pages that begin to show some discoloration, which is still unfortunate, but perhaps not as important. Personally, I've noticed ghosting in all of my Rocketbooks over time, and I continue to use them without worrying about it because I expect some wear and tear given how much I use them. Also, though my test didn't directly account for this, I did compare my test page ghosting to what I see in my bullet journaling pages that I erase every 2 weeks and reuse, and it's about the same. So I think it's important to note that whether you leave the erasable ink on the page for a long period of time, or erase it regularly but rewrite the same thing, the effect is going to be the same. Overall, page staining or ghosting is a part of the wear and tear that you should expect if you're looking to buy a reusable notebook. I haven't yet found a way to undo the ghosting and have ruined a few pages trying, so if you want to avoid it for as long as possible, my recommendations would be to use a thinner pen, apply lighter pressure when you're writing, avoid pooling the ink heavily in any one spot, and erase your notes within a month or so, whenever possible. With regards to the Panda Planner, the ink ghosting is of primary concern on the annual planning page, the back-to-back monthly calendars, and the roadmap page, so you'll have to decide if the benefit of planning that far in advance is worth the trade-off of some letter ghosting. Personally, I find there's a lot of benefit to still using my bullet journaling templates, even though the bullets do ghost a little over time. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. If you have any tips that work for removing ghosting from your Rocketbook, please consider sharing them in the comments down below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.